I like sort of had a different way of looking at this scene, and then just started trying different things on every take. And after the third one, I was like, I'm just gonna keep doing shit, and unless you tell me something. He was like, well, I'm not going to. And so it's strange and unusual to be allowed that space, and even if it doesn't work, usually it leads you to something else that's interesting. And we talked about it earlier, that like kind of getting comfortable somewhat in feeling lost, and then coming out the other side of that is a really exciting way to work.
Emma and Willem, this came right on the heels of Poor Things. So tell me a little bit about sort of when Yorgos started talking to you about this film and this idea specifically.
I heard about this a little bit before Poor Things. I had read this script. It kind of changed iterations. It was structured a little bit differently, and originally there were some ideas to just have an actor play like each, like not have it be a triptych in that way. So it was a while. So I knew about it for a little while, and then Willem found out the day before shooting. Because
almost.
Yeah.
They probably checked out the availability of a bunch of other people, and then when, they were in a crunch, they said, let's get that guy.
That's exactly right.
I mean, so Jesse, Mamoudou, and Joe, Joe, you've obviously worked with Yorgos before, but can you tell us a little bit about sort of your reaction to this screenplay and sort of coming into this?
My reaction to it, I'd never read anything like it before, and my experience of reading The Favourite was with Tony McNamara, and this is obviously a famous Yorgos' Greek writing partner. I thought it was bonkers and brilliant, and I didn't understand it, and I'm still understanding it. I loved that it was an anthology. I loved that it was 3 stories. Yorgos obviously spoke about the idea of having a kind of troupe of people playing 3 separate roles, which was really exciting. I don't know. I felt lucky to read it, and there was no way I wasn't going to say yes, and I knew that before even reading it.
Yeah, I second all of that Joe just said, but it also sort of felt like getting a sneak peek screening of a film that no one was going to see for a long time. And so you just have all of this inside you, and you're going to be, playing around in this world. And it was really kind of maddening to not be able to really talk to anyone about it, But yeah, I thought it was brilliant and exciting and unlike anything I'd read, and it definitely runs you through a wide range of emotions when you read it, but you can't quite comprehend why or what has just happened to you.
I kind of felt, I felt exactly the same way. It was one of those things where I'm going to do this, so let's see what it is. But I was overcome with a wave of like excitement and anxiety that Yorgos had to quell a couple of conversations. But other than that, it was just like a dream. I heard about the cast and all of these people I've respected for so long and wanted to work with, even separately. So to work with them all at once was just like, and Yorgos was like, come on, I got to do this.
From what I understand, and really this is for anyone to answer, Yorgos does this rehearsal process, where there are a lot of games, there's a lot of playing around. What was that like for this film in particular? And how did that sort of shape, again, this sort of strange sandbox that you were playing in?
Willem?
Yeah. Okay. I know how to answer the question, so I think. I was there. It wasn't that extensive, but it was important because we play these theater games, and it's really a way to get to know each other. It's not so much that we started to work on the text or the character or even discuss anything. In fact, I don't think Yorgos ever told anybody what to think or necessarily what had to get accomplished. but he made a company, and we all felt very comfortable with each other. It takes the edge off any strange feelings you have about producing, failure, success, whatever. So when you're shooting, you feel like you've already been working for a little while, so it takes the edge off. It's a lot of fun, and another important thing is the first time we also did it on Poor Things, and it helped me a lot to get to know Yorgos, because he's doing kind of variations on these theater games and movement things, and I'm like, oh, I'm from the theater. I know these since I was 17 years old, but it's how he conducts them. And he did it beautifully, and it really started to create the relationship between the actor and the director. Basically, him giving instruction and then, kind of shaping things as he saw it happening. And I felt that was kind of the experience also as we were working on the film, that he's incredible, that he gives you a very precise world, and his taste and his curiosities and his ideas are very clear. But he really watches like an audience and then sees how he feels. And I think he doesn't always push for a result. He really lets you go a little bit. And then that pushes him to the next step. And then he guides you. And it's a nice way to do it because it feels very organic. And it feels like you're doing things. You're doing things in the interest of a flow of something. It's not this kind of tension of you got to produce this thing and you got to convey this, and it is what it is. And the material's so rich that if you really give yourself to it, you kind of can't go wrong. And all this talk about understanding, that's never a problem for me. as long as I'm making, no, I mean seriously, as long as I'm making a relationship to what I'm doing and having an experience. And I like making that point because we're actors here, so everybody knows that, but it's important to remember that.
See, aren't you glad I gave that to Willem? Come on.
I talked a little long. Don't get me started.
Emma, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, jumping from Poor Things into this and like what I guess the experience was. I know you spent so much time sort of crafting Bella, sort of like entering this other world, getting to play 3 different sort of distinct characters, and what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like the chronology of the actual work was after Poor Things, I went and made this show, The Curse, which was like the opposite of Bella in every way, this character. And so I did have a nice palate cleanser to then go into this. I think going straight into this from Poor Things would have been wild. But yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, this was the first time I've ever, it was the 4th time that Yorgos and I worked together, but we had never shot anything that was kind of present day. Had never shot anything in America. And I had never, the short film that we made, he did write, but it was silent. And so in this, get the chance to work on something that he and Efthymis had written, it felt like I got to be sort of ensconced in the world that he creates that I fell in love with before we made The Favorite, because those films were for the most part written by him and Efthymis. So it was great. It was really nice. And I also eased in a bit because in the first story, there's a little bit, and then it just sort of spirals more and more out of control.
Did you film in order of these? And what was, Jesse, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What was the experience of filming in order, sort of taking on each of these successive characters?
I don't think there was really another way to do it. Also, Yorgos isn't a huge fan of wigs and all of that, and that wasn't the type of sort of transformation I think that he was after with the 3 different stories. And so we were, for the most part, doing all kind of practical changes, and there's less and less hair if you notice as the movie goes on. What were we going to say?
Remember when we were like, what if there's a little accent on this one? He's like,
Yeah.
Which one were you thinking about an accent?
Well,
Were you
just
thinking a twang?
a little bit of a twang for the for Liz and Daniel in the second story, and he's like, then and this is so correct, I think. Like everyone's gonna be like, oh, look at them doing this acting showcase. Like in this one, they're a little Southern.
Yeah.
You know, which is a great point because it's like it would stand out and you'd be like, look, they're doing their Southern accent.
Then it would be the Southern one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I was
that's-
just thinking about how we tried to differentiate it a little bit. Anyway,
Yeah.
it just ended up being haircuts.
Joe and Mamoudou, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of finding these sort of like little distinctions in these characters. Joe, I mean, you know, the dealer in the first is sort of such a fun and wild choice. So like, can you tell me about sort of like, you know, obviously Yorgos gives you a lot of freedom, but finding each of these distinct characters.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of it is there just in costume and like how you decide to like sculpt them that way, or you know how you're helped. And so I think with that character, you know, you see him so briefly, but Yorgos was like, what if we like slick back his hair and give him a little earring, and actually he's kind of slimy and British. And then in the middle chapter, the middle story with Jerry, I think he was called, the guy in the car who gets shot by Jesse, like maybe a bit more of a kind of frat stonery type. And but it was just fun. Yeah, it was fun thinking up these different people. But costume, you know, they were so helpful doing that, and thinking about characters generally. Yorgos helps steer, but also he doesn't want to like. He also wants you to like put your own stamp on it as well, which is nice. He gives you freedom to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the morgue nurse, that's a very specific guy. He almost defines himself a guy who rents out bodies for people to, you know, exhume and perform experiments on. It's like, okay, I think I got that. Will was an interesting one. That was my first day, and I was a little apprehensive working with Yorgos, Jesse, but admire both of them a lot. And I had like this whole backstory for all of this, like for this little bit of text, and Yorgos comes over to me and is like, you know, I'm like, oh, I need to like do a lot less with this than I'm doing, and yeah, well, it stayed in the movie, so I'm happy about that.
And Jesse, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that second story and sort of establishing the dynamic between this husband and wife in that one, and because it's so there's so much there's so much to sort of dig into. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that one in particular.
Well, I mean, we started that. I've said previously, less than 48 hours after we wrapped that first one, and you know, there's always kind of a life cycle in film where you start out and there's this period of time where you feel like you're finding your footing, and then it gets really exciting, and you know, and then it ends. And so I went through all of that in those first 3 weeks with Robert, and then started from scratch, and yeah, sort of felt like, you know, I had the rug pulled out from underneath me, and again, the material is so rich that obviously you spend as much time circling something beforehand, doing your own work, but even speaking about reading the script for the first time, it seeps into you whether you really invite it in or not, and so that story was not necessarily the most fun out of the three, but there was, I mean, so much of it was in that house.
Yeah.
It was kind of claustrophobic,
Yeah.
and the scenes are just a little icky. To put it lightly. But and then watching it, I was surprised at how much I loved it. I mean, it might be my favorite, and it was funnier than I thought it was going to be, to me. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
definitely. I mean, well, you said that, it wasn't the most fun. Was there one that was sort of the three that was most fun?
Well, I mean, for me, the first one, because it was my introduction into this world, and then the third one, I Emily kind of carries that one. So and I don't know, it was like that was kind of the carrot at the end. It's like, okay, then we end with this crazy Willem cult, and I was so excited. I mean. So that was like, all right, we just got to make it there, and then we'll be
Then
okay.
I get to chill
Kind of.
in my Tivas. Those costumes for Emily and Andrew are really my absolute favorite.
Oh,
And
can you talk-
Willem in the orange Speedo.
Well, I was going to ask Willem.
Absolutely incredible.
I was going to ask Willem a little bit because you obviously talked about how important the costume is. Tell me a little bit about the designing the costume of your cult leader.
There's not. What's going on? You know what? We spent a lot of time trying different costumes on for that guy because there aren't a lot of scenes, but it's important kind of to lay down the world with him. So what he looks like kind of identifies what kind of cult it's kind of be, what kind of sex they're having. I don't know. It starts to frame stuff. So it's important. And so I tried lots of different things. And basically, Jennifer, the costumer Johnson.
Jennifer
right?
Johnson, she's
Yeah,
amazing.
She's fantastic. Do you know her? Oh. I was going to say, I'll say hi to her for you.
Yes.
That was a lonely clap, but good. She just had millions of things, and this isn't, like a huge production, but she was just pulling stuff right and left, and we would just go and try different stuff, and then we'd shoot it, and Yorgos would say, no, and it was a process. But once we got there, the costume's very important, let's face it. If you feel good, you feel transformed. Everybody knows that. Even if you're not an actor, that's what why people. One of the reasons people put clothes on. Yeah, I like those Speedos. They were comfy, and I felt good walking around with Emma. Not just walking around.
Emma, can you talk a little bit about finding the suit? Because that suit is so, with Jennifer, that suit is so perfect for this character.
It was great. It was so fun. I mean, we're working with her again right now, and she's so creative and just amazing. And she found these suits for us. I don't even know where, but I think they could not have been like the brown one originally had like a ruched sleeve that kind of like made it. It was so unattractive. It was like really bad, and they just pulled the ruching out and turned it into that, and then it was like that nude color is just wrong, like that color with the suit of the silky blouse. Like everything's just a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
And the Tivas are a little wrong. Like why? And then I'm wearing that weird blue bag, and it's like, what? And I just loved it. It was incredible. And like they're in these, and then I thought that was the greatest look. That was like my favorite look in the entire film. You as Andrew, with the buzz head and the glasses and the suit and the Tivas and holding the iPhone to like look at Hunter, try to bring him a bag of body. Anyway, it was just it is to his point. Like as everyone knows, the costume is so important, and it does transform so much of how you feel. What are you guys talking about? Billy, don't.
No.
Not right now.
When I was a kid in Appleton, Wisconsin, and I used to go.
The greatest trick Houdini ever pulled was getting out of Appleton. Isn't that right,
Don't
Billy?
say that. Don't say that.
He got
Going to
kicked
Viking
out of
Theater
the
for
Appleton
kids
parade
show
for saying that on a
Saturday
talk show.
afternoon, and there was one man that was there all the time with all the kids, and he looked like
That's so niche. Why are you bringing that up right now?
anything. It's just a coincidence.
No one knows that person.
He
Sorry
enjoyed the
about
show.
that. All right.
I'm sorry, I'm wasting everybody's time here. But this is one of the reasons I like working with them, because they put me up to this. I can't help it. It's kind of like, they dare you.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of, the one constant throughout these stories is RMF, and working with this actor who was in Poor Things too, who is also...
He's not really an actor.
He's not really an actor.
Well, he sort of is now.
Now, well,
He's a
tell me a
superstar.
little bit about working with this man who plays RMF, Emma.
How much should I say? Yorgo, how much should I say about that? Oh, sorry, he's actually secretly here. Watching all of you.
He's not here.
Not just don't say anything about him. Okay, well, can I say why he's called Bella? Okay, so his name is also Yorgos. He is married to Efthymis, and he's incredible. And he's our director Yorgos is number one muse. He absolutely loves this man. He's a lawyer in Greece, but because they're great friends and he's deeply inspired by other Yorgos, he has now become an actor in Yorgos' films. So he is RMF, and he's in Poor Things in the brothel as, we're do a joke and whatever. But the thing is, okay, so there's 3 Yorgoses. There's this Yorgos. There's like a million in Greece. I mean, like everyone's named Yorgos because it's George. But there's this Yorgos. There's other Yorgos, and then there's our editor Yorgos, who we call Blackfish. But the nickname for RMF Yorgos is Bella, because one time, many years ago, he tried to say Balenciaga, but he pronounced it Bella Tsanga. So he's been called Bella for much longer than I was and anything. So on set of Poor Things, it's like, hey, Bella, and I'm like, yeah. And it was like, it's him, Anyway, there's the whole backstory.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yes. He's wonderful and very funny and has the best laugh in the world.
Jesse and Mamoudou, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of, the cop relationship in the second story, and especially sort of when the violence comes in and like working with the effects that would come in, and how that played into the second story.
Well, I mean, I guess I should have known because I was there when we were shooting it, but watching it, I was surprised at how tender we were with each other. It was really sweet.
Well, you're in so much pain.
I know. He was just like, please, God, be okay, Daniel.
Yeah, I just got to, handle with cares. It's my buddy.
The violence, yeah, what should I say? I mean, the scene with Joe, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it just gets very bloody. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of staging that, how that all came together.
I will say one thing. Jesse is so fucking strong. I could not move him off of Joe. It was the craziest thing. Seriously, it was like shockingly difficult. I'm telling you. Strong man.
I'll take it. I don't think I am, but
I guess I'm
I could take you.
extraordinarily
look
weak.
much stronger than me.
It's one of the two.
I don't know. It's like that scene's coming. It's one of those that like, oh yeah, doing licking the blood off the hand scene here in a few days. And then it's just
We've all been there.
I don't know how much staging there was. I mean, it was in the middle of the night, I think, when we were shooting it. It was just kind of like everything else, just okay, let's go for it and see what happens. And I mean, Joe's reaction when he gets shot, I thought was just so hilarious and amazing. Which I think he only did a take of that, maybe.
We did it really quickly, yeah. Because there was a rig that goes up the arm and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I think it was one take.
I think again, Yorgos. I think it was the first take that was used, and maybe we did it twice. But Jesse, you really wanted to lick that blood.
I mean, I had to.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, really for anyone, about the sort of, freedom that a Yorgos set gives you to like sort of try things. You've all said he's not very prescriptive in terms of what he asks of you. So, what is that like on set, sort of being able to test out sort of your choices with these characters?
Bill?
No.
I just did the whole Bella thing. They were talking about the bloody hand. It's your turn.
No, someone else.
You guys might be stuck with me because
I think that's okay.
I don't know. I guess I was expecting, based on Yorgos's films previous films that I've loved so much, there is a certain I guess consistency somewhat, although there are variations on these kind of themes that thread through all of his work, but there's a rigidity in some of them, and a lot of the characters feel very sort of constrained and sort of attempting to break out of something. And so I think there was a part of me that was wondering if the experience might be like it is when you watch one of his films. And I think there was a part of me that was almost like waiting for that. And then it just never came. And, he really, and I think it starts with the rehearsal process. It starts with the people that he puts together. And there's something, I remember one scene in particular where I had kind of forgotten that we were shooting that, because there was a bigger scene earlier, and there was this other scene in a bathroom. And then in that moment, I sort of had a different way of looking at this scene, and then just started trying different things on every take. And after the third one, I was like, I'm just gonna keep doing shit, and unless you tell me something. He was like, well, I'm not going to. And so it's strange and unusual to be allowed that space, and even if it doesn't work, usually it leads you to something else that's interesting. And we talked about it earlier, that kind of getting comfortable somewhat in feeling lost, and then coming out the other side of that is a really exciting way to work.
Well, we have to wrap. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for coming.